There's a really stellar Les Paul on Reverb. The seller doesn't ship to my area. Now, thankfully, I'm not actually interested in purchasing this one, but if you do happen to run into a similar situation, I do have a forwarding service available on my website. Let's just say if this was $2,000, yeah, I'd be finding a way to bring this in for review and documentation because it's such an interesting burnt orange, almost root beer-like vibes with some bird's eye, maybe even a little bit of chatoyancy within it. I can't quite tell if this is original finish that has been aged or has it been redone? Because let's face it, this thing has been extensively modified already. We've got a mini toggle here, likely for coil splitting, and when we come over to our pickups, they're double creams. They look like some sort of a DiMarzio, which would make sense why they have the coil splitter switch. So the odds of this guitar starting life looking like this with the mini humbuckers as a deluxe, very probable. It was very popular to route those things out for full-size humbuckers. Now we've got a glorious shot of our headstock. Definitely 70s era. We've got the nice large boat paddle style headstock. Looks like some craziness was going on there at one point. And looking at our tuners, we can already tell that they're not the original ones. That's a Schaller style button. And even though Gibson was utilizing Schaller tuners at this point in time, they would have the Keystone style tips. Yeah, that's exactly what I was expecting. This one initially shipped with a Kluson style tuner, and then somebody has these slightly less traditional Schallers on here. Normally I would associate that with a 6 on a side headstock, but it looks like they found a set that was intended for that. But now let's look at our serial number. Something's gone on here. This could just be a refinish process and they decided to leave no finish in this area. That way there's no questions on was it stolen or what's its initial identity. Because this would tell us it's the 600th in production for the particular day. This looks like we can just barely make out a 7, but maybe it's just this particular photo angle. I can't really read the day of the year, and I would imagine this is another 7, but man, it sure does look like a 4. Can we actually answer the question, was this refinished or not? Because I'm seeing a lot of red down here, and nearly like most of the finish has just been worn off the neck, because then we get that return of the reddish molasses color down here. And even if this did start life natural, I don't know if the ambering of the clear coat would make it look this different. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say, I imagine this thing was refinished and was just played heavily after that. But a player's grade guitar like this that's already been modified, does the refinish even matter at this point? Not as much as it would if everything else was original. So if you dig the look of this thing, go ahead and pick it up. It looks like a fun player. However, it looks like the seller has added an additional photo here since the first time I looked. People were probably asking questions. 475760. This extra 0 looks like a completely different font, like somebody added it. It's possible this is a transitional like 75 because this is still a maple neck. So this might actually be the original 6-digit serial, and then this one was added. And it looks like somebody's completely redone our electronics in here. We can see January 4th, 1980 right there. So 13779. 20-something week of that year, so 1979 pot code there. A little bit covered, but we can see what we need to right there to confirm 79. So this tells me it was probably a 79 or 80. And yes, we can actually confirm this one started life as wine red. You can see the residuals of the original finish back here. So that's a real head scratcher. Was this number just randomly etched into the headstock? Because we stopped that style by 75. Unless the whole thing was like rebodied and or re-necked, there's definitely something going on there. Let's see what our seller says. Mahogany body, 3-piece maple neck. I suppose we should look at that, because if it had the pancake layer, then that would tell us more. But that starts to phase out around 76, and I don't see it here, and the photo is just not high quality enough to see the additional layer down there. So, okay, they've identified our tuners, the frets, rosewood, super distortion pickups, pot codes, they're correct there. 2-pneumatic bridge. That also kind of helps date it because they switched over from ABR1 starting around 75-ish. But sure enough, they do say something about our serial. 7-digit serials used by Gibson in the 80s for refinishes, factory seconds. I've never personally heard of that in this particular era, but I do know that there's like some 50s and 60s stuff where they would redo the serials. But at the end of the day, it's a really cool vintage relic looking piece. They're asking $3,500, but you can always make them an offer. Next up in our guitar journey today, I wanted to look at this Les Paul. My goodness, that thing is just fantastic, is it not? Superly heavily worn in all the right places. It reminds me of a lot of what we were just looking at. However, you've got really, really thick mineral streaks on this one. Like, sometimes you'll find small flecks on some guitars, but this one, I have never seen a top exactly like that from Gibson. And you've got the flame figuring underneath. It's just a really aged-looking natural, or a super faded-out burst. The pickups and the hardware exactly match what you're looking for. Moving on to the headstock, is this actually a legitimate burst? Because that's all 50 spec up here. You've got your Les Paul model silkscreen really worn away. Nobody's messed around with our tuners. Could it be that we have real-deal PAFs in here? Well, I'm actually going to cut the charade now. This is a Murphy Lab. Like, wow. Usually, I am just not a big fan of aged guitars, but okay, guys. I think you might be onto something on this one. The more natural finishes can definitely take on a very interesting patina that doesn't look quite as fake as like some of the sunbursts, in my own opinion. Now, this thing is still very expensive, $12,000, offered up by a well-known music shop up in Canada that always orders some really cool stuff. But I suppose the real reason why the top looks so different on this one is it's torrefied. So that means they bake it, essentially, and get rid of all the moisture. Now, there's varying theories as to what that does to a guitar, either taking moisture out or just making it sound like a guitar that has been a guitar for a little bit longer. I think it just sounds fun to say. Baked maple, torrefied maple, whatever you want to say. I really like baked maple for fretboards. They're so ridiculously smooth. Would love to see Gibson bring those back in the Gibson USA department. But they have just, I'm speechless. Like, seriously. I am not a lover of being forced to have to buy these aged instruments when it comes to all the new artist signature models. But, I mean, if they can look like this, hey, why not? I'm sure a lot of people would think it's legit until you look on the back and see the Gibson custom medallion. Because even this has a slightly reddish tinge to the mahogany with a little bit of Lyman going on. The only thing that kind of bugs me is I think Gibson should limit how many 59 reissues they make a year. Because if you're wondering, hey, why has this got 6 digits instead of 5? It's because this tells you the model. So 1959 reissue in this case, the next digit will tell you the year of production. Now, whether it's 2015, 2025, you have to use context clues. But the last 3 are your production number. So normally it would be 9 space 5145 for the 145th. But since this is the 1459th R9 made that particular year, they get rid of the space. And I believe they also did that back in the 50s. But when I think of a reissue guitar, I think of this particular format. So that's what I like to buy, is the earlier examples in the year. If you want something similar but are on a tighter budget, I thought what CME listed for $1,800 was pretty attractive. This is known as a Les Paul Studio Premium Plus. Before Gibson, completely revamped the studios lately, if you were looking for the fanciest studio money could buy, it was either an 80s Studio Custom or Studio Standard, or I would direct you to the mid-2000 Studio Premium Plus lineup. Because as you're seeing here, you can find some wicked tops on these, but no binding on the fretboard or the body. However, what's cool about these, you can only vaguely see it. It has the faux binding effect when you buy a natural one, because you get the mahogany on the side and you can see the maple top there. So really all you're out on is the binding on the fretboard. But it used to also be considered crazy to spend $1,500 on a studio. Not so much anymore. But the back even has a little bit of chatoyancy to it. Now, if you can find one of these in the $1,100 to $1,200 range, it's a lot easier, but some of the more crazier tops usually will go for a slight premium, especially when you compare it to what's available nowadays. This one's extra cool because if you look closely at that neck, it looks like you've got some movement in that too. So flamed neck, body, top. But if you prefer the fancy electronics and other bindings, I can seriously suggest the newer ones, because they've really given some love to the studio model recently. But at the same time, they were using different woods back in the 2000s. That's not something that you can change, and it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just different, and you will never know which one you prefer unless you go out and try it. But this one does have a replaced bridge pickup, and it looks like it got that bridge on upside down. But speaking of unique R9s, here's a 59 and something that they called Hawaiian Fade. Don't forget, it's rare. I'm pretty sure this was just a custom order. So technically, yes, this is the rarest Les Paul to exist. There's probably only one. But as far as desirability, that is what sets the value of an instrument, not necessarily rarity. I wouldn't say this is the best top I've ever seen on a reissue, but it sure is unique. And with this untraditional color scheme, to say the least, I thought it was pretty sweet. It's like you're out in Poseidon's sea and the currents are getting scary. I suppose if you squint your eyes enough, you might be able to make out an eagle or something in the ocean swimming around. Okay, now that I bring it up, hear me out. This is the beak, and then maybe this is a storm cloud with some lightning going on. Tops like these can surprise you in person though, because they have a lot of movement to them. But being a 59 reissue, did they still aniline dye the back? We'll have to go through the rest of these photos to find out, because that would be kind of cool. Red back, blue top. They must have some weird lighting going on in this shop that's reflecting off this truss rod cover. But here we go. Nope, blue. But you get your typical 2020s looking wood grain on the back. And the blue stain is so strong, it makes your white serial number turn blue. But that's another one from 2025 and the 1980th in production. But just to round things off nicely in tonight's episode, look what was listed, a Les Paul Vixen. This was one of those cheap guitars back in the day that Gibson was just, kind of experimenting with. It was the baby version of the Les Paul Goddess, two guitars that were designed primarily for women, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's only women who want to play them. But someone's added a pickguard to this one and they've completely refinished it. Now, we do have reviews and documentations of other Vixens, but they started life a really dull satin finish. Now, some of them were pink, some were blue. They were very pastel influenced. But to see one refinished in green, I thought that was pretty sweet. Because you gotta remember, just like the Goddesses, those things used to be cheap and they were blown out because they didn't sell all that well, as far as my understanding of it. So people could pick these things up and make projects out of them. So as somebody who collects the Vixen and Goddess series, very passively, might I add, I don't pay crazy prices for them. It was kind of cool to see a different color here. Now in this case, you might look at the serial number and go, oh. What that looks like to me is they're copying the original serial number and trying to pick it out with a pin. That way they still retain the serial. That does not look nefarious to me. There is a logical explanation behind it. Now, as far as how nice this finish feels, yeah, that's always a gamble when buying a refinished guitar online. It could be great, could be terrible, but I do like the rosewood and the green. I think they should have did a green one of these. But all right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.